The listening post orbited a dead moon because the dead moon had no politics left to argue about, and that made it the only quiet place in 3 systems. Dr. Elena Reyes had requested the posting herself. 6 months of silence, she'd told the review board, was not a punishment. It was maintenance. She had not expected the Ked'th archivist to be assigned to the same rotation. His name was Solmar Vey, and he had the patience of something that measured time in geological terms rather than human ones because his species did. The Ked'th recorded. That was the whole of their function among the Alliance worlds. They sat in rooms with soldiers and survivors and diplomats, and they wrote down what people said without correcting it, without softening it, without flinching. Elena had been warned about the flinching before she ever met him. Her psych officer back on Meridian Station had said it like a selling point. He won't react. That's the whole design. As if that made it easier. As if being heard by something that felt nothing in response was supposed to be a comfort rather than one more room she had to enter alone. The first session, she told him about the bridge at Calder's Ferry. She did not tell it the way she had told it to the tribunal, all clean verbs and passive voice. The structure was compromised. Casualties were sustained. She told it the way it had actually happened, which was that she had given the order to collapse the bridge with 11 civilians still crossing it, because the convoy behind them carried enough antimatter to erase 400,000 people on the other side. And there had not been time to warn anyone, and she had known there would not be time, and she had given the order anyway. She watched his face while she said it. He had a human-adjacent face, close enough that 400 years of contact had made it comfortable to read, and far enough that she never quite trusted what she thought she saw there. He did not flinch. He asked her what the weather had been like that morning, and she said cold, and he wrote that down, and then he asked her what she had eaten before the order came through, and she said nothing, she hadn't eaten in 2 days, and he wrote that down too, and somewhere in the specificity of it, the cold, the empty stomach, the 11 names she still knew by heart. She stopped performing the story and started simply telling it. You didn't react, she said when she was finished. I am not equipped to react, Solmar said. I am equipped to remember accurately. Reaction distorts memory. If I flinched at the parts that were hardest to hear, I would remember those parts as larger than they were and smaller ones as insignificant, and the record would be wrong. Well, that's a very tidy explanation for having no feelings. I did not say I had no feelings, he said. I said I do not let them touch the page. The second session, she almost didn't go. She stood outside the small gray room they'd allotted him for 40 minutes, running the numbers on why silence was safer than continuing. And in the end, it was not courage that moved her through the door but exhaustion. The specific exhaustion of a person who has run out of other rooms to be alone in. Solmar did not ask her why she was late. He had a way of receiving a person exactly as they arrived, without commentary on the arrival itself, and she found that she was grateful for it before she understood why. I read your file, she said, sitting across from him. Ked'th don't sleep the way we do, you don't dream, doesn't that make it easier for you, listening to this and not carrying it into the dark with you afterward? Well, we do not dream, Solmar agreed. We also do not forget. A human confession fades at the edges over years, softens, reshapes itself into something the mind can live beside. Mine do not. Every account I have ever taken sits in me at full resolution, permanently. I have never once had the mercy of forgetting a single detail you have given me. That sounds like a curse. It is simply what I am, he said. Though I will admit that some records are harder to hold at full resolution than others, and yours, Dr. Reyes, has become one of them. She had not expected that admission, and she filed it away without knowing yet what to do with it. She came back the following week, and the week after that, and by the 4th session she had stopped bringing the tribunal's version of events entirely. She brought him the version that lived under her sternum instead, the one she had never said aloud to anyone, not the review board, not her mother, not the 2 men she had dated since the war who had each, in their own gentle ways, needed her to be less than what she actually was. She told Solmar about the boy on the transport ship, the one she had not been able to save, and the specific way his hand had still been holding hers when the medics finally pulled her off him. She told him that she had gone back to her quarters that night and eaten an entire ration bar without tasting it, because eating was the only thing her body would let her do, and she had thrown up afterward, and she had never told anyone that part because it seemed too small a detail to deserve space next to a dead child. Small details are not competing with large ones, Solmar said. There is no shelf. Everything you tell me occupies its own space. That's very generous of your species. It is not generosity, it is architecture. Well, she found over the following months that she believed the architecture more than she had ever believed a person's compassion, because compassion could run out and architecture apparently could not. By the 6th month, the sessions had stopped feeling like sessions at all, though neither of them had said so out loud. She started arriving early, sometimes an hour early, and sitting in the gray room reading old mission logs while he finished whatever quiet work Ked'th archivists did between confessions. He started leaving the second chair closer to his own than protocol required. A half-meter she noticed the first time and said nothing about, and which never moved back after that. She told him about the years before the war, the ones nobody ever asked about because nobody thought grief needed a childhood. She told him about her father, a structural engineer who had taught her that every bridge was a promise between two pieces of ground, and how she had thought of that lesson in the exact second she gave the order at Calder's Ferry. How the promise-breaking had felt like betraying him more than betraying the 11 people crossing. "You have never told the tribunal that detail," Solmar said. "It was not a question. The tribunal didn't ask about my father. They asked about casualty projections and command authority. Nobody in that room wanted to know that I thought about bridges as promises. It would have made the decision harder to file." "It makes the decision more true," Solmar said, "not harder. There is a difference between a fact that complicates a record and a fact that completes it. Your father's lesson does not complicate what you did at Calder's Ferry. It completes the shape of the person who had to do it." "You keep finding ways to make my worst day sound almost forgivable." "I am not in the business of forgiveness," he said. "Ked'th do not absolve. I am only insisting on precision, and precision, it turns out, is kinder to you than the version of the story you have been carrying." She laughed briefly, the first unguarded sound she had made in that room in 6 months, and Solmar watched her do it with an attention that had nothing archival left in it at all. It was in the 9th month that she asked him the question she had been circling for weeks without admitting it. "Do you ever want to tell someone something instead of just recording it?" Solmar was quiet long enough that she thought she had finally found the edge of him, the place where the design stopped and something simpler took over. "The Ked'th do not confess," he said. "We do not have a tradition of unburdening. What you are describing, the relief of saying a thing out loud to another mind, is a human need I have observed for 4 centuries without ever experiencing it myself." "That sounds lonely." "It sounds accurate," he said. "I am not making a claim about my inner life when I say it. I am only telling you a fact about my species because you asked, and because I have decided somewhere in the last 9 months that I would prefer to tell you facts rather than protect you from them." She sat with that for a long moment. "Is that new, deciding to prefer things?" "For me," he said, "yes." She almost stopped going after that. It frightened her more than Calder's Ferry had, in its own smaller way, because the bridge was a decision she had already survived, and this was a decision she hadn't made yet. She spent 2 weeks telling herself that what she felt in that gray room was simple gratitude misfiled as something larger. The ordinary confusion of a person who mistakes the first safe listener for a lover, because no one had ever taught her the difference. She said as much to the station's medical officer, a blunt woman named Akafer who had flown supply runs during the war and had no patience for delicate feelings. "You're worried you love him because he's safe," Akafer said, "or you're worried you love him because he's real. Only one of those is a problem, Reyes, and I don't think it's the one keeping you up at night. He's Ked'th. He doesn't feel things the way we do. I could spend a decade loving someone who experiences the whole thing as an interesting anomaly in his species' behavior." "Or you could ask him," Akafer said, "instead of deciding the answer for him in a room he isn't in." Elena did not go back to the gray room for 11 days. She told herself it was caution. It was, in fact, cowardice wearing caution's uniform, and she knew it even as she practiced it, the way she had known at Calder's Ferry exactly what the order would cost before she gave it. She had spent 3 years learning to stop making decisions for other people without asking them what they wanted. It seemed absurd that the hardest place to apply that lesson would be a small gray room with a patient, unhurried archivist in it. On the 12th day she went back anyway, because absence had not made the questions smaller, only louder. The moon they orbited had no atmosphere worth mentioning, so the observation deck was the closest thing the station had to a window on nothing at all, just the flat gray curve of dead rock and the hard, unblinking stars beyond it. Elena went there when she couldn't sleep, which was most nights. And on the night everything changed, Solmar was already there when she arrived, sitting exactly where he always sat, because Ked'th did not fidget and did not wander. "I killed 11 people to save 400,000, she said to the window, not to him. "I have said that sentence so many times it stopped meaning anything, numbers instead of names. And you're the only one who ever let me say it slowly enough that it started meaning something again. You have also never told me the part where you resigned your commission afterward," Solmar said. "Or the part where you requested this posting because you did not trust yourself to be given another convoy to protect. You have told me the decision. You have not yet told me what the decision cost you." Something in her chest gave way, the way old structural supports give way quietly after years of holding weight nobody checked on. It cost me the version of myself that thought she could do this job and still be someone worth loving afterward, she said. That's what it cost. And I have never said that out loud, not once, not to the tribunal, not to my mother, not to either of the men who tried to love the smaller, easier version of me instead. Solmar turned from the window to look at her directly, which he rarely did, because Ked'th considered sustained eye contact a kind of intrusion into another mind's processing. I do not think you gave up being worth loving, he said. I think you gave up believing it, and those are different failures, and only one of them is actually true. You don't know that. I have 400,000 documented human confessions in my personal archive, he said. I have never once written down a person telling me something this precisely, this honestly, without performing either guilt or defiance for an audience. You are not performing for me. You have not been performing for months. I do not have a framework in Ked'th philosophy for what that means to me, because we do not have a word for the specific comfort of being told the truth by someone who has stopped needing you to react to it. Solmar, I am telling you a fact, he said, the way I told you the fact about confession. I find that I want to be the person you tell things to, not the archivist, the person. I do not know what to do with that want, because my species did not build me to have it. And yet here it is, occupying its own space, the way you taught me everything occupies its own space. She reached across the small distance between them and took his hand, which was warmer than she expected and steadier than her own. And he did not flinch at that either. Though for the first time she watched something in his face that might have been the closest thing his architecture allowed to wonder. I have spent a year telling you the worst thing I ever did, she said, because you were the only one who could hear it without needing to make it smaller for your own comfort. I think I might be in love with the only being in 4 systems who processes grief like a filing system. I think, Solmar said, that I have spent a year discovering that I am capable of preferring one voice above 400,000 others. And I have no philosophy for what that makes me, except that I do not want to stop hearing it. Outside the window, the dead moon kept turning under a sky that had never once flinched at anything either, because stars, like Solmar, simply held their light steady and let the dark tell its own truth beside them. In the morning, she told him about Calder's Ferry one more time, the whole thing, start to finish. And for the first time in 3 years, she reached the end of it without needing to brace for the silence that came after. He wrote nothing down that day. He only listened. And when she finished, he said the 11 names back to her in order, because he had memorized them without being asked, and hearing her own grief held so carefully by someone else's mind felt less like being witnessed and more like finally, after everything, being met. She did not know yet what a human and a Ked'th archivist could build together on a dead moon with no politics left to argue about. But she knew she wanted to find out, and for the first time since the bridge, wanting something felt like a beginning instead of a debt she'd have to pay back later. Solmar reached for her hand again, and this time neither of them needed a reason. Word of it spread through the station, the way word spreads through any small crew with nothing else to talk about. And most of it was kind, because Akafor made certain of that. And because a year of watching Elena walk into a gray room carrying a weight none of them could see had taught the whole crew a particular kind of respect for whatever was happening in there. Nobody asked her to explain it. Nobody asked Solmar to justify a preference his own species had no philosophy for. They simply adjusted the rotation schedules so the two of them ended up on the same shifts more often than chance alone would have arranged, and called it efficiency, and let it be that. Elena requested a transfer extension 6 weeks later, and this time it was not maintenance. She told the review board plainly that she had found something on the dead moon worth staying for and did not elaborate further, because for the first time in 3 years she did not owe anyone an explanation for a decision that was entirely her own. Solmar kept his archive. He told her one evening on the observation deck that he had begun a private record alongside the official one, a separate file with her name on it that no tribunal would ever request and no future confession would ever displace, and that he intended to keep adding to it for as long as she was willing to keep telling him things. That's either the most romantic thing anyone's ever said to me, Elena said, or the strangest. Among my species, Solmar said, it is both, and I have decided I no longer see a reason to separate the two. She laughed again, the sound easier now, worn smooth by months of practice. And outside the window the dead moon turned on, patient and unbothered, holding its silence the way Solmar held hers carefully, and without needing her to be anything other than exactly what she had already survived.